Welcome back to the deep dive. If you've ever tried to make, real significant change happen in your job, maybe your community, even just your family, you know it often comes with some serious blowback.
Oh, absolutely.
The second you push people out of that comfort zone, well, the resistance really starts to build.
Yeah.
So today, we're digging into the essential guide for dealing with exactly that pushback. Ronald Heifetz and Marty Linsky's classic book, Leadership on the Line.
Great book.
It really operates on this one fundamental truth. If you're doing real leadership work, the kind that matters, you will face intense resistance. The work itself is, well, inherently dangerous.
That's really the core thesis, isn't it? And our mission here today is to help you quickly grasp the main framework, this idea that lasting change has to be adaptive, and then arm you with the diagnostic tools and survival strategies you need.
Right.
Not just to lead effectively, but maybe even more importantly, to actually survive the inevitable counterattacks and, stay in the game long enough to make a real difference.
I love how they set out their goals in the book. It's not just theory, it's really practical, actionable rules for, political engagement, basically.
Exactly.
Their three main goals are, first, proving why sustainable change must be adaptive. Second, giving you specific tools to lower the personal risk involved.
Which is huge.
Huge. And third, maybe the most encouraging bit, inspiring you to actually seize those everyday leadership opportunities. You don't need a fancy title to start doing this often dangerous work.
And that need for adaptability, it's never felt more urgent than right now, has it? Just think about the sheer scale of the global challenges we're all facing today. You've got climate change driving extreme weather, new viral threats popping up, these massive societal divides fueled by the internet, widening income gaps, fracturing communities. Our old solutions, our old ways of doing things, they often just don't cut it anymore.
Right.
Adaptability isn't just some nice-to-have management strategy. It's really a prerequisite for survival in this modern world.
Okay, so let's dive straight into the foundational concept then, because they argue if you mess this up, if you misdiagnose your challenge right at the start, everything else you try is pretty much guaranteed to fail.
Absolutely critical.
We have to be able to tell the difference between a technical challenge and an adaptive challenge.
His distinction is, it's everything. A technical challenge is one where basically the problem is recognizable and the solution already exists somewhere within your current know-how, your expertise, or established procedures.
Okay.
The organization, or the expert, knows how to fix it. If you have a leaky pipe, you call a plumber, that's a technical fix. The work gets done by the existing authorities.
Got it. But an adaptive challenge, that's totally different territory.
Completely different. Here, the solution doesn't exist yet. And, crucially, it requires people, the ones affected, to change their core beliefs. Maybe their deeply held values, their comfortable habits, even their loyalties. There's learning involved, often sacrifice, real behavioral shifts. This means the work has to be done by the people with the problem, not just handed off to experts or authorities.
And the big danger zone is trying to apply those technical fixes to adaptive problems.
Exactly. That's where things go wrong. The book gives this really striking example of President Jamil Mawad in Ecuador, back when he was facing a massive economic crisis.
Okay.
Now, this situation clearly demanded huge adaptive shifts from the entire population. They had to accept deep loss, fundamentally change how they viewed economic stability, their future.
A really painful process.
Immensely painful. But Mawad, he mostly treated it as technical.
So he focused entirely on the expert policy levers, consulting global economists, converting the currencies, slashing budgets, that kind of thing.
Precisely. He was essentially doing the work for the people, applying these top-down, expert-driven solutions.
Look at the political fallout.
Immediate. He completely alienated his base. Mawad himself reflected on this failure later, quite beautifully, actually. He said he felt like a doctor who performed an emergency amputation, the technical fix, but did not prepare the family for what they would have to endure. He focused only on the surgery, the technical part, but totally ignored the grief, the learning, the adjustment required for the patient's, the country's recovery.
Wow.
And that failure to engage people in their own adaptive work, it cost him their confidence, their trust, and ultimately his presidency.
That really highlights maybe the most painful insight in the book. People don't actually resist change itself. What they resist is loss. If an adaptive change means I have to give up a habit I love or an old loyalty that defines me or some part of my professional identity that makes me feel competent and safe, I'm going to fight back.
Naturally. That pain of loss, real or perceived, is exactly what fuels the intense resistance leaders inevitably face.
And that resistance doesn't just stay quiet, right? It shows up as political moves designed to shut the leader down, neutralize them.
Yep. Heifetz and Linsky call these the leadership traps. They're the forces that try to basically take you out of the game so the system, the community, can comfortably snap back to the old way of doing things, the status quo.
Let's look at a couple of those traps they identify because they're really effective at silencing the messenger. The first one is marginalization or tokenism.
Ah, yes.
This is where you're either pushed to the sidelines completely or maybe you're brought in, but only as a symbol that actually insulates the system from having to make real change.
They use this great case study from the New England Aquarium back in the 90s when they were trying to address diversity.
Right.
So the board hired Glenn Williams, an African-American man, to run programs specifically aimed at inner-city youth. Now, on the surface, that looks like progress.
Sure.
But the trustees were really only focused on the technical question. How can we get more people of color through the doors?
Okay, so fixing a symptom.
Exactly. By hiring him for this specific kind of isolated program, they very effectively avoided the much deeper, much more painful adaptive challenge, which was asking, wait, which of our core cultural values, our management systems, our unwritten rules, might actually be keeping minority communities away in the first place?
So Williams became a token. His presence allowed the organization to check the diversity box
Precisely.
without anyone in power having to confront their own potentially uncomfortable biases or change the way the institution fundamentally operated. And when he eventually left,
The institution was basically right back where it started, insulated from the necessary adaptive work. Classic marginalization.
the second trap is maybe even more direct: attack and diversion. This is where your opponents don't even bother arguing the substance of the issue you're raising.
No, they attack you, personally, to shift everyone's attention away from the uncomfortable message.
It's a devastatingly effective strategy, especially now, because it hijacks the attention economy. They bring up the example of Lani Guinea,
Her nomination.
nominated for Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. Her opponents largely ignored her entire track record, her policy ideas, and instead relentlessly focused on labeling her the quota queen.
Based on one complex academic law review article, right?
Exactly. The fight wasn't actually about civil rights policy at all. It was purely about destroying her credibility, making her radioactive.
And that kind of attack, whether it's twisting a law review article or digging up some personal scandal, it works because it consumes what the authors call the currency of leadership, which is attention.
Attention, right?
If the public, the stakeholders, everyone is glued to the drama, the conflict surrounding the messenger, then they're completely distracted from the uncomfortable message itself. They don't have to face the difficult adaptive challenge you've put on the table.
Okay, so if being the messenger trying to lead adaptive change is inherently so dangerous, what can you actually do? What are the tools we need to respond strategically and, frankly, survive? Let's shift from the diagnosis to the how-to.
Right, the operational strategies.
Yeah.
Well, the first tool, and maybe the most crucial one for survival, is probably the most famous metaphor in the whole book. The need to constantly get on the balcony.
Be it on the balcony.
It's a mental activity, really. You have to be able to operate on two levels almost simultaneously. You're down there participating, you're in the thick of it. That's the dance floor.
Right. In the action.
But you also need to be able to mentally step back onto the balcony and observe the whole system, see the patterns, the dynamics.
So you have to move back and forth between those two spaces. Like when you're dancing, you're caught up in the music, the immediate steps, the emotion.
Exactly, caught up.
But from the balcony, you stop dancing for a moment, and you can actually see the bigger picture. Who's dancing with whom? Who's standing alone by the wall? Where are the conflicts really brewing? And critically, how is your own behavior, your own dancing, contributing to those patterns?
That external perspective is absolutely vital for diagnosing technical versus adaptive problems in real time as things are unfolding. It also helps you do something else they talk about. Listen to the song beneath the words.
The song beneath the words, what does that mean?
It means people often say one thing like, we need a bigger budget, when the underlying issue, the adaptive fear, is something totally different, like, I don't trust that other department not to hoard resources, or I feel like my expertise isn't valued anymore.
Ah, okay.
The balcony view helps you hear that deeper anxiety, the fear, the potential loss that's hidden behind the surface statement.
Okay, so the balcony is for diagnosis and observation. What's the next tool for actually managing the situation?
Well, if the balcony helps you see what's going on, The second tool helps you manage the system's tendency towards dependency.
Hmm.
Give the work back. Or, as they put it, placing the conflict where it rightly belongs.
Give the work back.
Yeah.
Meaning don't solve other people's problems for them.
Exactly. Leaders, especially effective ones, often fall into this trap of trying to solve everyone else's adaptive problems. You want to fix things, reduce distress, but doing that just creates dependency. It stops people and the organization from developing their own capacity to handle tough challenges.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there an example of this?
Oh, a fantastic one. They talk about Phil Jackson coaching the Chicago Bulls during a really intense NBA playoff game. Scottie Pippen, one of his star players, got angry about a coaching decision and flat out refused to go back into the game.
Wow. That's huge insubordination, right? Especially in the playoffs.
Massive. The huge technical problem-breaking team rules and a huge political problem for Jackson as the coach.
So what did Jackson do? I assume most coaches would have immediately exercised their authority, bench him, fine him, suspend him, make a big show of taking control.
Right, the typical authority move. But Jackson brilliantly realized the core problem wasn't just a technical rule violation. It was an adaptive issue bubbling up about team responsibility, commitment, how they handle pressure together. So Jackson resisted that powerful urge to absorb the conflict himself, to be the sole problem solver. Instead, he turned to the rest of the team and basically said, look, what just happened has hurt us. It's damaged our ability to win. Now you guys have to work this out.
He gave the problem back to the team.
He gave the adaptive work back to them. He forced them to confront the difficult questions. What do we owe each other as teammates? What's our shared commitment here, especially under pressure? He essentially transformed a moment of crisis that could have fractured the team into a powerful moment of collective learning.
But hang on, if Jackson does that gives the work back, isn't he taking a massive political risk himself? He's letting a major visible act of insubordination slide, at least in the short term. Couldn't that undermine his authority or make other players feel like Pippen got away with it?
That's a great question, and it highlights the real knife-edge leader's walk. Yes, there's absolutely a risk, but this is the subtlety of adaptive leadership. Jackson wasn't abdicating his authority, he was using it differently. He used his authority not to solve the problem directly, but to frame the problem for the group. This has hurt us. And then hold them accountable for doing the necessary adaptive work. He essentially said, this is serious, and it's your responsibility to fix the underlying team dynamic.
So he legitimized the need for their work.
Exactly. Yeah. The alternative, him just punishing Pippen, might have solved the immediate disciplinary issue, the technical problem, but it wouldn't have addressed the deeper adaptive challenge within the team's culture. It might have even made it worse by reinforcing dependency on him to police everything. It's a calculated risk, for sure.
Okay, that clarifies it. It's about using authority to empower adaptive work, not just enforce rules. Makes sense. All right, what's the third key tool?
The third one is about managing the pace, pacing the work. You simply cannot force rapid, disruptive, adaptive change down people's throats.
Because change involves loss.
Exactly. And people, groups, organizations, they have a finite capacity to sustain loss, grief, anxiety, and disorientation at any one time. There's only so much they can handle.
So trying to do too much too fast, it backfires.
Speed kills adaptive change. It really
Yeah.
does. If you push too far too fast, you basically overwhelm the system's coping mechanisms. You generate such intense fear and resistance that the whole initiative collapses and often the leader gets targeted.
Any examples of that kind of mispacing?
Yeah, they point to some high-profile political examples from the 1990s in the U.S. President Clinton's initial push for comprehensive health care reform, for instance.
Right, that was huge.
Huge and pushed very broadly, very quickly. The sheer scale of the proposed changes and all the perceived losses associated with them for different groups just felt overwhelming to many Americans. They weren't psychologically ready.
And the other side.
Similarly, when Newt Gingrich became Speaker, he tried to implement the entire, very ambitious Contract with America agenda almost instantly. Both leaders, despite different goals, arguably failed in those big initiatives, partly because they rushed the process.
They didn't allow people enough time to adjust, to process, to maybe mourn the parts of the old system they were losing.
Exactly. The art of pacing is about carefully sequencing the work. You need to introduce just enough heat, enough distress to motivate people to change and face the uncomfortable realities.
But not so much heat.
Not so much that the system completely shuts down, panics, and attacks the source of the pressure, which is usually you, the leader. It's like regulating a thermostat.
That makes a lot of sense. Turning up the heat, but managing the temperature. Okay, so these tools, balcony, giving work back, pacing, help manage the external situation. But the book also stresses the internal work, right? The personal foundation needed to survive all this pressure.
Absolutely critical. To stay effective and, frankly, to stay psychologically alive in this kind of work long term, the internal work of self-knowledge and self-discipline is just as important as any external tactic.
And a key part of that is.
The huge challenge of distinguishing role from self. This is a big one. The authors explicitly warn us. It is easy to confuse yourself with the roles you take on. The world colludes in the confusion.
Yeah, you become the CEO, the senator, the project lead. That title starts to feel like who you are.
Totally. You get defined by the role, by the success metrics, the public profile, the perks, the power. And the world reinforces that constantly.
Right, like that old film, The Seduction of Joe Tynan. The senator starts treating his own family like his staff because the public role completely consumes his identity.
A perfect example. And the danger is, if your entire sense of self-worth is wrapped up in that role, then any political attack, any setback, any loss of that role, it feels devastating. It feels like an attack on you, personally. It can cripple your ability to lead effectively or even to lead again after a failure.
So what's the survival strategy here?
You have to consciously work to separate the two. Anchor your identity in something deeper than the job title. So when you are attacked personally, when someone calls you incompetent, corrupt, or even just, a jerk, you have to learn to interpret that, first and foremost, as a political defense mechanism. It's likely an attack on the issue you represent, the uncomfortable change you're pushing, not necessarily an accurate reflection of your inherent self-worth.
Detach the attack on the role from your sense of self.
Exactly. If you can maintain that internal anchor outside of your professional role and your values, your relationships, your purpose, you gain the psychological freedom to take necessary risks. You know that even if you lose the job, lose the vote, lose the argument, you don't lose yourself.
That's powerful. And closely tied to that, isn't it, is this idea of avoiding the myth of measurement.
Yes, absolutely connected. We live in a world that's just obsessed with quantifying everything. Success equals money, market share, clicks, votes, prestige.
Right.
Things you can count.
Right, the bottom line.
But the kind of deep, sustaining meaning that often comes from leading difficult, adaptive work. Well, that stuff often just can't be measured. You can't put a number on integrity or moral courage or building trust in a fractured community.
So how do we value that if we can't measure it?
They tell this incredibly moving story about the Baseball Hall of Famer Hank Greenberg to illustrate this point perfectly. Greenberg's stats, his home runs, his RBIs, those were measurable. They secured his place in the record books, his Hall of Fame plaque. That's the measurable success. But perhaps his greatest contribution, the thing that gave his career profound, lasting meaning, happened in 1947. That was the year Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, becoming the first black player in the major leagues.
Facing unbelievable abuse.
Unimaginable hostility, isolation, threats. And Hank Greenberg, who was a revered Jewish player and had faced intense anti-Semitism himself earlier in his career, publicly went out of his way on the field to offer Robinson encouragement, support, a hand of kindness when almost no one else would.
Wow.
That gesture. It wasn't a stat. It wasn't measured on any scoreboard. But it was an act of profound moral leadership. It reinforced the moral authority that his baseball stats had earned him, and it gave his entire career a different kind of weight, a lasting significance beyond the numbers. It was an act of service, of connection, that transcended the technical measurements of his role.
That's a beautiful story, and it really brings us towards the end, doesn't it? The dangers of this work are real, but the potential rewards, the meaning derived, are profound.
Absolutely. And to stay in that game, to navigate the constant pressure and distress without burning out or becoming cynical, you need what the authors call a sacred heart.
A sacred heart.
Yeah, it's about having the courage to hold onto your curiosity even when you're confused, to maintain your doubt even when you feel pressure to have all the answers, to keep your innocence, your openness, even when you've been attacked, and critically, to hold on to your compassion even when you're under personal siege.
So not letting the political battles harden you completely.
Exactly. You can't become cynical. You have to protect that core vulnerability, that openness, because that's where the connection happens.
And ultimately, the reason for taking on all this risk, all this potential pain, it comes down to meaning, doesn't it? They frame leadership as a practical art, a way to genuinely connect with other people and contribute something valuable to their lives, to their growth.
At its heart, they say this work is truly a labor of love.
A labor of love.
Yeah. So as you listening right now, Look at the challenges immediately around you, maybe at work, in your neighborhood, maybe even within your own family. It's worth remembering that the form your contribution takes doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah.
The opportunities for service, for connection, for that kind of love,
Mm.
they're always present, right up until the very end of your time.
Which leaves us with a final, maybe provocative thought to mull over. If you find yourself holding back, maybe feeling the risk is just too great. The question Heifetz and Linsky implicitly ask is this: what essential gift of yourself, what unique contribution are you choosing to withhold from the world?